Hello everybody, in today's episode of Head vs Heart, the cheapest Range Rover you can buy, the third generation L322, a cultural icon, but is it worth the inevitable heartbreak? Anybody on the hunt for a cut-price Land Rover is sure to benefit from this channel's headline sponsor, CarVertical. This is a service that cross-references multiple databases internationally to give you a detailed and easy-to-understand report about the car you're thinking of buying. All you need is a registration or VIN number, and with the link in the description, you'll get a special discount too. CarVertical is also now available on mobile, with the same great service, but just easier to use on the go. Here's the thing, the Range Rover really is a true motoring enigma. It genuinely is a proper icon. I think this car has built itself a reputation over the last 50 years that if you were to see one in a museum alongside something like the Citroën 2CV, the Ford Model T or the VW Beetle, it would not look out of place. Not only is this the car responsible for the posh roader craze, but it's also one that is confident in its styling. Much like the Porsche 911, you could take a modern day Range Rover and show it to someone from 50 years ago and they would recognize it. But here's the really crazy thing. Speak to anybody that's actually got a Range Rover and the story is always the same. Oh, what do you have before your current car? Oh, Range Rover. You have any problems? Oh yeah, this broke and that broke and that broke. Oh, okay. What do you have before that? Oh, Range Rover. How many problems? Oh yeah, that fell off and that broke and it was in the shop for 3 months. Oh, okay. And how's the current one getting on? Oh yeah, no, that's broken as well. Tailgates stopped working and yeah, the electronics have packed up and yeah, no, it's been in the shop for 3 months. And oh, okay. What are you going to get next? Oh, Range Rover. Yeah. A car like that can cause actual madness must be something special, right? Range Rover generations also have a tendency to be quite long-lived. That's how the car is over 50 years old and just going into its 5th generation. The original, now known as the Classic, was on sale for over a quarter of a century, having landed at the very tail end of the 1960s and going out of production in 1996. It was in fact on sale for a little while alongside its successor. The 2nd generation car, the P38, was really doomed from the outset. It was designed by a Land Rover which really was quite cash-strapped. However, during this phase it was bought by BMW, who sadly arrived a little bit too late to the party to make any dramatic changes. So they opted to release it in as best a guise as they could and start work on the 3rd generation car. The original intent was for that to use essentially all the interior and gubbins from the then current E38 7 Series. A team was set up, based partly in Germany and also here in Britain, to design this very important vehicle. However, by the time this car actually reached the public, Land Rover had been sold yet again to Ford, who understandably didn't really want all that many BMW bits in it. The first few years of the L322, as it was then known, still had many BMW parts in. However, from 2004 to 2006, the car changed dramatically. Out went the BMW engines and in came ones from Jaguar and Ford. One of the things that I absolutely adore about this generation Range Rover is that you can clearly tell all the people who designed it were under absolutely no illusion whatsoever about the sort of people who were going to buy it and the kind of car that it was. Because if you wanted to buy one of these brand new, you had a choice really of just 2 engines. You could have a petrol or a diesel, and if you bought a petrol, you got a V8. No matter whether you bought an early or a late one, you got a V8. The early cars had the BMW M62 as seen in things like the 5 and 7 series, and the option of diesel then was a BMW straight 6. The later cars offered engines such as the 4.2 litre supercharged V8 as found in the XKR and XJR. Also, I believe a Range Rover specific variant of the naturally aspirated V8 displacing 4.4 litres, which I've never seen in a Jaguar product. And then at the very end of its life, the car also got the 5 litre engines. By 2010, when these engines arrived, Land Rover had been sold yet again, now to Tata, and so with the new power plants also came an upgrade for the infotainment, which brought it in line with the rest of the JLR lineup. This car is a late 2009, a TD V8 featuring the Ford 3.6 litre Lion engine. And I have to say, for these cars, a big meaty diesel really does make an awful lot of sense. I had the pleasure of driving the last of the 4th generation Range Rover, which had the 4.4 litre turbo V8. You could also get that in the very last of these. That's an exquisite engine, but I must say, I also rather like this. Its power output is somewhat modest, 270 horses, but its torque is not. 470 pound-feet. That's 640 newton meters, and crucially, more than any of the petrol engines ever had. Many standard Range Rover features are present and correct here, from the chiseled and very squared off styling, which gives this car an absolutely amazing presence on the road, but also makes it surprisingly easy to drive. Because you can see every corner of the car, you're never in any doubt as to where it is. This, I have been told by people who work at JLR, is something they have always been very proud of. They call it the command driving position, not to be confused with Mercedes infotainment. Other typical Range Rover quirks and features you'll find in here are the dual glove boxes, though the top one is pitifully small, mostly taken up by the CD changer. You also have the twin sun visors, so you've got your regular one here, that folds out, and then there's another hiding behind it. And at the back, of course, that iconic split tailgate, which is a favourite of dog lovers all over the world. It also makes an excellent bench for changing out of your dirty footwear or merely admiring the scenery. The suspension is McPherson strut up front, double wishbone at the back. The car also has air ride on all 4 corners, making it very capable but also rather comfortable. I have to say, air ride is one of these things that in theory works really well, but in practice not so much. Here it makes total sense. This is a particularly lumpy and bumpy road, and though this isn't quite as costing as, say, a Rolls-Royce or maybe even a top-end 7 Series or Jag, it is doing a very good job of smoothing out the imperfections in the road. Alright, 3-point turn hill start torture test, while we test visibility, which is excellent. We've got a reversing camera. The steering is nice and light. This car still has a nice proper old school gear lever that moves. I like that, I'm always much more confident with them. The very last of these got the Jaguar little rotary dial thing, which I'm not so fond of. And below that you will find a selection of driving modes and your adjustment for the air ride as well, which to be honest I am leaving well alone because it's in normal road mode. And as we're on a road, that seems about right. Of course, this being a Range Rover, if you actually do want to take it off-roading, it is extremely well equipped and will have all sorts of diff locks and modes and sensors and things to make sure that it does a very good job. When the original Range Rover landed, it was a somewhat revolutionary vehicle. The idea of a 4x4 that was also a luxury car was something very radical. However, by the time this car came along, some 30 years later, the marketplace was a little bit more crowded. Not as bad as it is today, but even with the offerings we have now, there is still something special about this car. And I think it's best summarized in one word: warmth. I have had the pleasure of sampling many of the current crop of super SUVs from the Germans, including the likes of the Porsche Cayenne Turbo and the Audi SQ7. Those are excellent cars in their own right, but they really do miss that element that makes this seem just a little friendlier. You get in something German and typically you've got lots of black leather, carbon fibre, maybe a little bit of chrome or silver in there. It's all very firm, very hard. They're all about angles, edges, and trying to look ultra modern, which ironically I think is going to date them very quickly. Step inside a Range Rover or many a Jag though, and things are very different. Though it may not be quite as high tech, and in fact some of this infotainment and the switchgear is really quite embarrassingly poor, you sit down and just go, Samid, this car's very kind owner, feels the same way about it. He changed the rear discs and pads himself. It wasn't a particularly enjoyable job, but after he was done, he got back in the car and simply went, oh yeah, this is lovely. He bought this because he wanted something that could be used and enjoyed all year round. His partner has a new job, which means she's doing quite a few miles and therefore wants a very comfortable commuter. And he also wants something that he can take up to Scotland at a moment's notice and arrive feeling refreshed and wondrous. This is a perfect way to do that. Now, it may not surprise you to hear, but these are cars that do have a few flaws. I went to look up a couple of buyer's guides for the Range Rover, and when I did, common problems included the car from just about every conceivable angle. The BMW V8 of this era, the M62, is more robust than its successor, but still suffers from BMW's inability to build anything other than a straight 6. Oil leaks are very common, Vanos failures can happen, but the big one is timing chain issues. They're not commonplace, but become more frequent at higher mileage, which now represents a lot of the cheap Range Rover market. According to owner forums, later examples from around 2004-2005 on seem to be generally more reliable with less problems across the board. These cars should be fairly easy to identify as they no longer had a BMW engine. The Jaguar V8s and the Ford diesels are a little bit better behaved, but even those are not unburstable. Cooling hoses are a well-known weakness even on the very last engines. These have a 6-speed gearbox, some of the earlier cars have a 5. These are generally quite decent, but do need maintenance, which a lot of people skimp on. The last cars also got the 8-speed, but for one of those you are going to pay a significant premium. These certainly suffer from corrosion. There are a few common failure points. This already has a little bit inside one of the rear doors and under the top half of the tailgate. Electronics are a well-known JLR weakness, and I am slightly concerned at the fact that this car has a digital dash, and it surely must have been one of the first cars in the world so equipped. This is a 2009 car. As with any large cars, consumables like brakes, bushes, suspension components, tyres and the like, always keep an eye on too, because this will have an appetite for them. Handily, most of the parts are reasonably priced, but in truth, if the idea of a big V8 petrol is enough to scare you off a car, just leave it. Don't think about it. Get something else. Even the diesels are not particularly economical. This has averaged around 28 to the gallon and on a run will do just over 30. But that's not brilliant, especially when diesel currently costs more than super unleaded. I'm sure many people will be tempted instead by one of the supercharged V8s, and I can certainly sympathise with that. However, bear in mind, those are cars far more likely to have been bought by people interested in the performance potential, and for that reason may not be in as good a condition as your equivalent diesel. There's a car show on today. There's a lot of nice Japanese machinery about. However, back to some very good news. These have taken over as the cheapest of all the Range Rovers. About 10 years ago, I seem to remember people buying Classics or P38s for something like 500 quid. And though the day of anything decent and working for 500 quid is pretty much gone, on Auto Trader today, there is an example up for just over £1,000. Truth be told, I think that's just as likely to be a spares or repairs car as anything else. But from about 3 or 4 grand, these are cars being advertised as runners, and you get a lot. There's double glazing, 3-zone air conditioning, okay, basic, but sat-nav. There's even a TV, which still works because it's digital. You have a sunroof up front, which makes it feel even lighter and airier again. The air ride in here actually works. It does its job, and these are a brilliant car to drive. Now, this car is currently sitting on some Scorpion tyres that do look somewhat off-road biased. They're not too extreme, and the tyre roar isn't bad at all. Those do curb your speed, particularly in a corner, and you must remember this is still a 2.5-ton bus. But it's a genuinely enjoyable 2.5-ton bus. Yes, there is a lot of stuff rolling around in the back. Sorry about that, and sorry, Samid. But it's fantastic, this thing. It's not the quickest thing, put your foot down, and it's not massively keen on kicking down, but it being a diesel, I'm not really sure there's much benefit to it doing that anyway. At just about 5 meters long, it is a large car, but not so hilariously long that it's unusable. It also has the decency to be big enough that it actually justifies its size. In recent times, the Range Rover has spawned a number of offspring, some of which I think really do serve a purpose, like the Velar. However, stuff like the Evoque, I really do struggle to justify, because in just about every applicable way, a Golf is better. However, this really does the job. It is, I think, a good looking car, not beautiful, it's handsome, it's rugged, and it's an icon. Stick a private plate on this and many people would fail to guess that it's a 13-year-old car and a 20-year-old design. It has space for 4 adults, it has space for 4 adults' things, and you really can take your 4 adults and their things just about anywhere. The fuel tank is capacious at 100 litres, meaning you won't need to stop unless you really want to, and I feel like this is the sort of car where I could happily go from here to Scotland, stopping only for myself and not the car. I do live in the countryside, so I could actually in many ways justify having a car like this. It does snow where I live, it certainly floods, and there are many times I've not really wanted to take any of my cars out. If I had something like this, I'd never have an excuse not to get to work. The real problem is that I have spent a long time saying that nobody actually needs an SUV, and in many cases an estate will do the job even better, or at least just as well. I despise the fact these are bought by people that live in urban areas, but I can't hold that against the car. And for everybody that does have genuine need of something like this, you know what? Even today, this makes a very, very good car. So then, head versus heart, L322 Range Rover, would I? Yeah, I would.